Hello boys and girls and welcome back to Planet 40k. It's got cold again. I've got double hoodies on because it's freezing in here. I thought winter was over, but it's probably just starting really. But we're going to get on with our rate it or hate it videos on the channel, looking at Necron units from the new codex, and we're going to be doing my take on it, my tactics, my playstyle, and at the end of the video I decide whether I rate it or hate it. There is no middle ground. I've got to select one or the other. So let's just jump straight into this one. We're talking today about the Necron Lychguard. So let's get into the state card then. We've got the Lychguard, they're 32mm bases, 85 points for 5, 170 points for 10, and they've got the keywords of infantry. That's all they've got now. Well, Lychguard as well, of course, but other than that, that's all they have got. As for the statistics, they're only moving 5 inches. That's quite slow when you compare them to Necron Wraiths. They're quite slow when you compare them to Praetorians and so on, even Scorpion Destroyers. They're the slowest of our melee units, so you've got to take that into consideration. We've got a toughness of 5, so fairly tough, not as tough as Canoptic Wraiths and so on, but that's tough enough for standard sort of elite infantry. 3+ armor save and 2 wounds is okay, I guess. I think Lychguard may have deserved an extra wound, I'm not sure. How do I feel about that? I think they should have got an extra wound. I think they could have maybe squeezed an extra wound in. These guys are quite tough. They're almost Terminator-like for Necrons. I know we're not playing Space Marines, but they're kind of like that caliber. So maybe they could have got another wound in there for this codex, but they haven't. 7+ is the leadership, and OC is just 1, which is fine. They're elite. So let's move into the weaponry. We've got the melee weapons. Well, that's all we got, in fact. Melee weapons, you've got the choice here of either the Hyperphase swords or the war scythes. Now, if you're taking the Hyperphase sword, you then also get to take a Dispersion Shield, which effectively gives you a 4+ invulnerable save. I think that's the way most people play, but we'll get onto both and then we'll kind of pro and con it. So the Hyperphase sword with the Dispersion Shield, you get 3 attacks, you're hitting on 3s, you are strength 6, -2 AP, 1 damage. So you've got the AP, you've not got the damage. Strength 6 means you can wound, Space Marines and even tougher things like Lychguard, for example. You can wound them on 3s, but it also means if you're going up against single wound models, Gaunts, Guardians, Guardsmen, and that kind of stuff, you're wounding them on 2s, and the 1 damage is enough. And you get 3 attacks per model. In a 10-man unit, that's 30 attacks. Now that weapon, you've got to kind of consider the fact that we've got a bit of durability. You've got the invulnerable save, which I think is massive. It is huge. But if you didn't want to go for that, and you could take the war scythes instead, these are equipped with devastating wounds, so any critical wound rolls go straight through armor, straight through invulnerable saves, and they inflict the damage, which is damage 2 in this case. So only 2 attacks per model this time, so we lose an attack, so a 10-man unit is only 20 attacks, you're still hitting on 3s, you're now strength 8. Strength 8 used to be better in 9th edition than it is in 10th, because of course monsters and vehicles went up in toughness. It's still great for going up against toughness 4 models against Space Marines because you're wounding them on 2s. It's also good against toughness 7, toughness 6. That's like a really heavy elite kind of infantry. But when you're now going up against monsters and vehicles, we used to be able to wound on maybe 4s. Now it's a bit more of a stretch. We will be wounding on 5s, and that's there's no sort of 2 ways about it. The AP is -3, which is good, and the damage is 2, which again kind of doesn't really interact that great against monsters and vehicles. We need a bit more damage on that front. So really, these are elite infantry killers. Their wounds is also nice, inflicting 2 damage on every critical wound. But we now lose the invulnerable save, because you've not got a shield with this loadout, which becomes a bit of a problem in my opinion. Now, in 9th edition, we used to be able to take a Technomancer, or we used to take Orokin the Diviner. So Orokin in particular, in fact, used to give the unit an invuln save. Now you can't actually interact with this unit with Orokin the Diviner at all, or for any Cryptex for that matter. So there's no 4+ invulnerable save coming from anywhere else, and there's no 5+ no pain save coming from anywhere else. So that's the melee weapons. The abilities, you've got Reanimation Criticals, of course, good, and Guardian Protocols, which is unique. While a Noble is leading the unit, each time an attack targets this unit, if the strength is better than our toughness, so if it's strength 6 or more, you subtract 1 from the wound roll. Basically, most of the time they're going to be wounded on 4s, unless they're strength 10 then they'll be wounded on 3s. But strength 10 doesn't... I mean, I suppose strength 10 could go up against Lychguard because it would normally wound on 2s. But I think strength 10 is probably better reserved for monsters and vehicles. But you do need to watch out for that. You could still be getting wounded on 3s there. But yeah, really it's going to be 4s, which is nice, but you do need a noble within the unit. So you've got the options of the Necron Overlord, you've got the Overlord with the Translocation Shroud, the new guy. You've also got a couple of named Overlords, which is Imhotep the Stormlord and Trazyn the Infinite. Now, nobody uses Trazyn the Infinite at this moment. I do want to investigate if his sticky objective thing is a thing for the Hypocrite Legion. I don't think it is. We'll have to look into that, but that's for another day, another time. But Imhotep is playable. I actually use him in my list for the CP farming. So if you've got Imhotep or an Overlord within the unit, or Trazyn if you want, then you'll get in the Guardian's Protocols ability. Now, we already mentioned you can't be sticking any Cryptex, you can't be sticking Orokin the Diviner, so they are kind of, that's their only defense. In the previous edition we had a bit more defense to this. That's all they do actually have. So that is the data sheet. Let's get into my tactics. So it's worth noting that out of the 5 detachments in our codex, Lychguard work in at least 3 of them. The Obeisance Phalanx, because they've got the Lychguard keyword, which is of course key for that detachment. They're going to get that +1 to wound against a selected unit every battle round. The Awakened Dynasty, if you've got that Overlord model within the unit, it's going to be a +1 to the hit roll. And the Hypocrite Legion kind of works with anything really. They're going to be coming in for strategic reserves. You could potentially even put the enhancement on to give them deep strike, and so on. Now, it's not going to really work with the Canoptic Court because you can't add a Cryptek, so they're not going to add the detachment roll of re-rolling the hit rolls. I mean, you can still use them in the detachment, but you may as well just use Race at that point, right? They've got the Canoptic keyword. They're not going to interact with the Annihilation Legion, so we can kind of count that off, write that straight out. But if we're talking about my tactics and my playstyle, which of the detachments would I mainly use for Lychguard? I think I'd go with the Index detachment, the Awakened Dynasty for this one. I know they've got a lot of synergy with the Obeisance Phalanx, but I think the Awakened Dynasty is still quite strong, and a lot of people have dismissed it because, of course, the Canoptic Court and Hypocrite Legion are quite good now. So when you're playing the Awakened Dynasty, you're going to have to take an Overlord or the named Noble, as we mentioned, but you're going to be taking them anyway for the Guardian's Protocols ability. But because they're in the unit, you're going to also gain Command Protocol, so a +1 to their hit roll, so they're going to be hitting on 2s. Now, the Obeisance Phalanx, going back to that for a moment, the +1 to the wound roll is actually better than the +1 to the hit roll, but it's only 1 unit per turn, whereas the Awakened Dynasty is all game, providing that your noble is, well, your character is still alive within the unit. And in fact, with that Awakened Dynasty, even if your character goes down, you've got a method of popping him back up with the Protocol of Eternal Guardian. And it happens at the end of the phase now rather than as soon as they die. So it has been buffed. So that will keep that ability up and running, as well as Command Protocols. I mean, it's not just that. The leaders won't likely die unless there's some sort of precision attacks, because we've got 5 or 10 toughness 5 models. I use them with the Sword and Shield, so they're going to have the 4+ invulnerable save on top of that. It's a -1 to wound them, potentially with the bigger weapon strength 6 and onwards. And then if you are taking an Overlord model, or the Translocation Shroud Overlord, you've got the Resurrection Orb, which, even though it's been nerfed because it's a once per battle item now, it's also been buffed because you can kind of use it whenever you want. And you're using it for D6 wounds as well, not just D3. So as soon as you start losing a few models, you can pop it if you want and get them back. Now, we've got other pieces of synergy within the Awakened Dynasty. We've got the Command Protocol of Undying Legions. If you lose a model, you can be using Reanimation Protocols. And other synergy, not so much for defense, but more offense. You've got the Protocol of Hungry Void for the +1 to the Strength and AP. So you could be taking those Hyperphase Swords to Strength 7. May make you be able to wound on 3s rather than 4s perhaps. And you get the extra AP as well to -3 AP, which is always nice. Now, in general, I would like to stick to the shields. Because we've lost Orokin and the Technomancer for this unit, we're not getting an Invuln save on them. And without the Invuln saves, they're kind of Glass Hammer. They are really Glass Hammer because, yes, they are toughness 5, but they've only got 2 wounds each and a 3+ armor save. So if you've not got that invulnerable save and we've lost that Feel No Pain save, they will go down quite quickly. Now, if you were to play War Scythes, you got to then remember these guys only move 5 inches. Then they're quite slow, and I feel like when you've got strength 8 with 2 damage, you need the speed. You need to be able to get into an engagement range. The Scorpion Destroyers have got the speed, but they've not got the strength 8. The Praetorians have got the speed, but they've not got the strength 8. So we're kind of struggling in our codex really to have both the speed and the strength at the same time, which again is why I prefer to go with the Sword and Shields. I would rather just walk them into the no man's land, just get onto an objective, hold the ground. They can fight off units that are trying to take the objective if they need to, because they've got those hyperfade swords. But more importantly, they're going to be durable. Now I wanted to do a quick mention with the Hypercrypt Legion here. Even though my key detachment is the Awakened Dynasty, the Hypercrypt Legion is an alternative way to get the unit into engagement range, because again, you could bring them out from strategic reserves or put that enhancement on them to give them deep strike. You can also use that monolith perhaps with the dimensional corridor, so they can still be charging from the Eternity Gate if needed. It is quite heavy on CP, but you've got options there. But to be honest, I think we've just got alternative options now that hit just as hard. Now let's get into my comparison. This is a bit of a new subject into these videos that I've added. Comparison. What options do we have that can replace the Lychguard? We've got quite a few. Praetorians, the first one, Triumph Praetorians, they're quicker. They can also shoot. So they're not just melee, they can actually do stuff at range. And they've got the 10-inch movement, so I think they're an option. We've got the Scorpion Destroyers, they're also quicker. Okay, they're on strength 7, but they do make up with it because of their toughness. They've got toughness 6. And they've also got access to devastating wounds like the Warscythes do with the plasma sights. All the Katana are incredible. I mean, they're probably our most punchiest units we've got in our codex. And ironically, the Nightbringer is 255 points, and 10 Lychguard alongside an Overlord is 255 points. So I know what I'd prefer. Now, they're not going to have as much OC on the OC front, but if you're purely taking the Nightbringer to just annihilate stuff, who cares about the OC? You're there to kill stuff, you're not there to hold ground. Canoptic Spiders are another comparison. They are strength 8 and they are damage 2, although they do hit slightly worse outside of the Canoptic Court, so unless you're playing the Canoptic Court, they're not as good in my opinion. But the main comparison that we've got to talk about is the Canoptic Wraiths. I think that's the elephant in the room here. Canoptic Wraiths have literally taken the spot of the Lychguard in this codex, and I'll give you all the reasons why. I mean, okay, the Wraiths are double the points, literally are double the points per model, but they're double the amount of wounds. They've got 4 wounds, not 2. Second of all, they're tougher. They've got toughness 6, not toughness 5. Okay, they don't have Guardian Protocols as their ability, but they're always toughness 6, which is good. They've got 10 inches of movement, not 5 inches, so they're moving twice as fast. They've got both the invulnerable save as well as the 2 damage weapons. Okay, it's not strength 8, but you've kind of got the best of both worlds in a way, 2 damage and the invulnerable save, whereas with the Lychguard, you're either taking the invulnerable save or the 2 damage weapon. You can't take both. They've then got some range weapons on top with the particle casters or the translocation beamers. They can even throw out mortal wounds in their movement phase. And then of course the final cherry on top is the fact that they can take a Technomancer for the 5+ feel no pain save, which I think is the main reason now why Canoptic Wraiths are so good. So yeah, there's a lot of units that potentially outclass the Lychguard, but there's definitely at least one of them that outclasses the Lychguard. And yeah, it's good, the Canoptic Wraiths. So let's get into the rate it or hate it part of this video. For me, I changed my mind through this video because I thought, you know what, they're still useful. They're half the points of the Wraiths, so you don't have to spend as much points, and if you want to just bunker down onto an objective, these guys can do that. But I just can't see a situation where I just wouldn't take the Wraiths. Another thing I didn't even mention about is the Canoptic Court as well, which is another detachment where the Wraiths are just far superior, and that's one of our better, if not the best detachment we've got. So for this video, I've got to, at this moment in time, say I hate them. Never thought I'd say that about Lychguard, but at this moment, yeah, not for me.